to ensure that we implement, and where we have to improve, where our strategy is not effective enough, we are doing so. So yes, it's true, the crime is increasing, but it's a reflection of the crime as it is happening in the country. I think I should stop here for now, Casey. Thanks.
Rudzani, what are the kind of crimes that you would find your health facilities and officials often exposed to?
We have crimes such as theft of state assets. We have crime of assault to health professionals, including the healthcare users, which are our patients. We have crime relating to intimidation. We have armed robbery that will happen in our spaces. So such crimes as they are happening in the country, the Department of Health is not exempted from that. And there's no specific crime which is prevalent in our space that is not happening in the entire country. Like I said, it's a reflection of the crime that's in the country. Thanks.
Bulela, let me come to you. As the Association of Private Security Owners in the country, I would imagine that there's some kind of reporting that your members also do in terms of their experiences with crime. How prevalent would you say it has been in the health sector?
I'd say that there has been an increase, as Mr. Mbila has indicated. Obviously, the increase is driven by socioeconomic problems that we have in the country at the moment. I think the more people that are unemployed, the higher the rise that you get in the crime. We've actually noted that since COVID-19 and post-COVID-19, the numbers have increased in terms of the rate of crime that we experience. And it's not only on security officers, but even on members of the SAPS. But obviously, for us, our main concern is with our members of our industry, which is the security officers.
And what are the incidents that you find are often linked to them?
So the incidents that we normally get, and I'll just speak in terms of our security industry in general, is that with the armed response, the type of incidents that we get is where security officers are disarmed of their pistols, and then in some cases even shot with those pistols, which is why generally we call for disarming of security officers and not arming them, but rather have those officers who are specially trained, the tactical armed response officers being the ones who are armed. The other types of incidents for officers who are not armed is where, as an example, where they guard warehouses or places where there's cable, is where they get tied up, usually get beaten up, and then the thieves go off with the assets that they steal. So it's usually physical attacks. I mean, the most recent one, which was at Nearbank, is not one that we normally experience. But I mean that one was quite gruesome, which is why we're having this conversation.
Yeah. All right, Bulela, thanks for that. Mbali, let me bring you in here. You speak on behalf of nurses. You would have a sense of how health workers are being affected by this crime.
Yes, Cathy. And these incidents, they've been happening for a very long time. And if you look at the employer, interventions are very limited, or they are not there. And if you look at these crimes, they are targeting certain areas. The targets are on certain areas. And if you look at it, for me, I don't think it's really matter if you are a female or a male security. What matter is that the crime rate in this country is very high. The high rate of crime is causing a lot of instability in the community. Because if the community can protect the healthcare workers or the healthcare facilities, these incidents will be limited. And if the employer really wants to intervene in this action, needs to intervene quickly before we lost many members due to murders. Because as I'm talking to you, we are burying one of our nurses over the weekend who was murdered while he was online on duty. And if you look at it, it's not a matter of security. It's a matter of the community and the employer making sure that we are our members are practicing in a safe area where it's safe to do so. To be a healthcare worker in these days is no longer safe because you don't feel safe and the employer is not making sure that we are practicing in a safe area.
Mbali, if you don't mind my asking, can you share details of what happened to your colleague who you say was killed at work?
Yes, he was working at the outreach team, driving a state car, and he was brutally murdered, or he was hijacked on a gunpoint, and they murdered him on gunpoint, and they took the car. And that's not the first incident where our members are hijacked on gunpoint. And in the same week last week, one of our members in one of the clinics in KwaZulu-Natal was hijacked on gunpoint, just in front of the clinic at Umlazi L section. So these incidents are continuing, and the interventions of the employer are very limited. And it's questionable when the employer reads a statement saying that they've beefed up the security at certain provinces, of which is not true. And it's a worry because they need to suspend these services until the community work with the healthcare facilities to make sure that our healthcare workers are safe.
So do you believe that the targeting of health workers, as you said, is mostly outside of healthcare facilities, or does it also happen inside?
It's both. It's both. But with our province, they are targeting the outreach. Once the car left the institution on their way to their working point, they are targeting them. And then during the festive, what's going to happen, Cathy, what you're going to see most is when the group people entering the institution drunk and demanding the services or harassing our employees or our nurses or all healthcare workers. So we're going to see more of that as we are approaching festive season. And that's why we need to do the risk assessment thorough as we are approaching the festive season. And we need to do this risk assessment must be done by the security company affect the contracts, because you could see that they don't do risk assessment. As we're talking about this issue of the Department of Transport, where our three securities were harassed and sexually assaulted, it shows that the owner of the company didn't do the risk assessment, because how can you allocate females at night alone? How are they going to render service? How can they protect the institution?
And I'm assuming then, Mbali, that the vehicles that you speak about, which you say are often targeted, are these marked vehicles? So they've got the branding of the department on it. It's clear that this is this is a vehicle that is doing work on behalf of a state entity.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Bulela, let me bring you in and give you an opportunity to respond to what Mbali is saying, especially on the aspect of risk assessments that are being done, and really the crux of the issue here, which is the female security guards and whether or not they need to continue being deployed to do the night shift.
Okay. I actually agree 100% with Mbali on the part which you mentioned, risk assessment. To clarify, our call as TAPSOSA is not to have a complete ban on females working on night shift, but to use a risk-based approach in that. And by risk-based approach, what I mean is that security is not something that is static in terms of being fixed. So whatever deployment that we agree with a particular client, so if I use example, a health facility, the client might say that this is how I want the guards to be deployed. But as a security company that has got the expertise, we have a responsibility to have ongoing risk assessments where we assess in terms of the infrastructure, how secure is a facility. We look at obviously the risk areas, and then we're able to change around the deployment. So in effect, yes, we are not saying that female security officers are incompetent to work at night, but we're saying that you will find that some sites are more riskier than others, and where there's a higher risk, we call that the female security officers they're not deployed at night. But the risk assessment is very important to do it on an ongoing basis to be able to root out the threat.
Of course, then the obvious question, Bulela, to ask would be, what are the particular risks that you believe female security guards face at night that their male counterparts don't face? So what makes them more vulnerable than their male counterparts?
I think the obvious one is the rape. We've had plenty of instances where, in fact, if I use the one at Nearbank, there was a mix of, and just to correct Amari, there was a mix of both male and female security officers. The male ones were just tied up and beaten up, but these guys decided to then go one step further with the female officers and violate them sexually. So I'm saying is with the males, it does not happen, but the risk with the females is that if you have people who are violent, they will then take the opportunity to violate them sexually.
Okay. So that's the main factor. There isn't another key factor that you may have noted on your side.
No, that is the biggest risk to them that we have identified.
Okay. All right. We'll continue the conversation in a moment. We are looking at the security, in fact, the threats that security guards, in particular female security guards, are facing at public institutions, but more specifically, the health department. We'll get a response from Rudzani Mpilo, who's the head of security at the National Department of Health, in a moment. It's 10:30, time for your latest news headlines.
Thank you, Cathy. In your headlines, lawyers for human rights say officials abuse their power when detaining undocumented migrants. The organization launched a report on the status of immigration detention in South Africa, focusing on recent trends in immigration detentions in the country. The Council for Medical Schemes has warned that the medical aid industry will collapse if the relevant authorities do not handle the National Health Insurance Bill cautiously. The National Council of Provinces has passed the bill, which many in the sector are resisting, saying the government is ignoring their concerns. And the multi-award winning musician Bulelwa Mkutukana's memorial service will be held tomorrow at the Rhema Bible Church in Randburg in the north of Johannesburg. Mkutukana, whose stage name was Zahara, died in a Johannesburg hospital on Monday at the age of 36. Details on these and other stories at 11. Cathy has your SAFM market update.
Taking a look at your markets this morning, the rand is currently trading at 18 rand 99 to the dollar, 23 rand 78 to the pound, and 20 rand 48 to the euro. Markets in Asia ended weaker, the JSE mainly firmer in mid-morning trade. Markets in Europe are flat this hour. Gold is trading at $1,978, platinum $929 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $72.65 a barrel.
Cathy Mohlahlana on SAFM.
All right, we continue the conversation on the talking point. Let me head over to Mpilo Rudzani, who is the head of security in the National Department of Health. So, Rudzani, you've heard the reasoning given by Mbali and Bulelwa, both of which have outlined the risks that at least they face or they see some of their members facing. And Mbali doesn't believe that there's been a lot of initiative on the part of the department to try and intervene with these high violence levels.
Yeah, thank you, Cathy. I think as a department, we agree that we were confronted with serious security risk as a reflection of the crime that's happening in the country. Like I said, we through the support of our principals and at the level of National Health Council, which is the meeting chaired by the minister with all METs and HODs, they have put security as one of the non-negotiables. And we account to that structure agreement. We have put plans in place which we are implementing, and KwaZulu-Natal, Cathy, is part of that. And in fact, in KwaZulu-Natal, I'm coming to you now, right here at KZN, in trying to support the province and respond to such crimes that are happening in the public health sector. The feeling that DINOSA and other stakeholders in the public sector that suggest that they are not safe, I agree with them. But that does not then suggest that we are doing absolutely nothing about it. We have invested a lot in security. The task team, Cathy, has conducted the assessment, and we have come up with the intelligence-driven strategies, which start to talk to how effective our security measures are in all public health facilities. How good are we implementing and enforcing access control measures? How good are we in as far as contact management is concerned? How good are we in investing in the human capital with the human that are managing security as a program? And in fact, in KwaZulu-Natal, we have appointed an ex-police general to manage security. That will tell you how serious are we in terms of addressing security issues. Perhaps getting to the issues that, the issue of female security officers being targeted while working a night shift. We agree with our colleague from Tapsosa that our approach should be intelligence-driven, should be risk-based. However, we should be careful as we do that, because as it is now, we do not have any evidence that directly suggests that the targeting of female security officers is as a lack of the intelligence-driven approach. That evidence we would not have as a department, and we will continue engaging at Tapsosa even of this line so that they can then take us through. We are willing to work with them to ensure that we cap the rate of crime. Cathy, the approach of government is to address historical legacies, unemployment, poverty, and inequalities. And if we may then take a decision to then say women should not be deployed at night, I don't think we'll be supporting women to access the job market. I think it would be unfair for government to do that, including addressing issues of inequalities. Women are equally capable like men. You have women in the security cluster, in the specialized services in police and also in SNDF that are doing exceptionally well. What we should deal with as a sector, together with our stakeholders, is to ensure that our risk-based approach suggests to reduce, if not to do away with crime, without necessarily limiting it to the vulnerability of women, which we agree and we support the issue of dealing with gender-based violence. But we should be careful of not addressing gender-based attacks with gender discrimination, which may suggest to deny women an opportunity to participate at that level. So the view that suggests that...
Yeah, I don't think that there are necessarily any easy answers to the problem, right? But from the part of the department, do you believe that women are more vulnerable at night, that female security guards are more vulnerable than their male counterparts?
Look, to respond to your answer, our health practitioners, including the assets of the state, are vulnerable. Firstly. Secondly, the force that was employed...
They what, Rosani? Sorry, I missed what you said there.
Yeah, I'm saying, firstly, the primary vulnerability here is to our health professionals, right? Secondly, is the assets of the state that security companies, through their men and female security guards that they deploy, are there to protect. Thirdly, when those criminals attack or want to have access to our facilities, the first line of defense is security practitioners that we have deployed. So the threat or the vulnerability is both to security officers, not necessarily based on their gender. What we should understand on how criminal works, Kate, is that criminal will take an opportunity of anything should it present itself. So if they attack and they happen to find a woman, like what happened in the Department of Transport in KwaZulu-Natal, which was just unfortunate, but I don't think where we sit, the aim of the criminals was to go there and rape. We are of the view that they were there to steal and then find the opportunity to get a woman, and that's why they were sexually assaulted, which is regrettable. But the research then suggests that female officers are more exposed than men as a sector, then believing that what we then want to do and what we have been doing is to ensure that as we deploy male and female to also comply to other searching requirements. Remember...
So effectively then, Rudzani, as the Department of Health, you don't support this call that is being made by the Association of Private Security Owners?
What we're supporting is that it should be risk-based, but the outcomes will then not suggest that females should not be deployed. Risk-based, you are saying if you are in a high-risk area, you must adequately put resources that are proportionally higher than the perceived risk. But I don't think there will be any risk assessment outcome that will suggest that here you need only a male, right? So we are mindful of that.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. All right. Mohlahlana, what's your response to that?
Hi, Cathy.
Hi. What's your response to what Rudzani is saying?
Okay, my response, I think I didn't elaborate on this more clearly when I was speaking to, or when I was responding to Mbali. I also would want to say that we need to be careful of portraying women as being less competent or being weak. I've been in this industry for a while, and I've had some very efficient and strong women that I know if I were to send out, men would basically run out because of their competency and their skill set, right? But what I do say is that in that risk assessment, we need to slightly differ with Rudzani, is that on the outcomes of the risk assessment, right? So if I take, for example, if I do a risk assessment and it turns out that the facility, from just a fencing perspective, is actually got all fencing where people can just walk in and out. It's an isolated place. The way that we have to deploy the officers to be able to cover the facility is that they spread out, where there's a risk of officers going in twos or in some instances one. I would not advocate for keeping the females, particularly when they're not armed. I would say that you're not looking at the complement. Let's find a way of moving them to day shifts. So I think once we can cover, because normally with the risk assessment, we're not looking, some things cannot be solved immediately. So for example, if it's infrastructure challenges, those will not be solved overnight. So I would say that in the meantime, let's look towards protecting the female officers and ensuring that they have a safe space, while we then holistically cover all the gaps that have been identified. Yes, ideally in the long run, everyone should be exposed to the same type of risk where the male and the female officers are deployed equally the same and are able to complement each other.
All right.
But just to emphasize, I'm saying in the short term, where there's gaps, I think the answer would be to then protect the female officers.
So, Mbali, if I bring the conversation back to you, and again we look at the fact that, so you have property, this is public property that is often targeted by criminals. In the case of healthcare facilities, you have both employees and patients that would be victims of crime, right? You can't really, sort of try and determine whether your patients are going to be male or female. So whoever happens to be in the facility at the time that the crime happens then becomes a victim to crime. But you also have yourselves as health professionals that are at risk in these instances. So if we say that female security guards are at a higher risk in the evenings, does that mean that female healthcare professionals are also facing a higher risk working at night? Because we have to carry the rationale through to its logical conclusion.
Cathy, what is important that you need to understand here is that it's not about the gender. The safety, both of us, male or female, need to be safe. So I don't think that the statement that we need to by the statement by Ubulela saying that they feel that they mustn't allocate females at night. While at our clinics, our healthcare facilities, you'll find both females and males. And the people that you're looking after, which are our patients, are both females and males. So the main thing that we need to talk to here is how do we make everybody safe? Not to look at the gender of the person that you need to be just supposed to be allocated or assigned to work at night or assigned to work at a day shift. Because as Bilo said, we are working towards the equality of both genders, male and female. So then how come now we feel that this one needs to be exposed? Because if you look at our incident in the province, there was a male security who was killed in the clinic at Phoenix. He was a male. He was not a female. There was an incident where both males and females were hijacked. They took their guns. They were both males and females. As you said, even the recent incident, there were males there. So it's not about male or being male or female. We need to make sure that we make sure that everybody is safe at the workplace. We proposed, Cathy, to the department that they must just suspend these outreach programs. They must suspend working to open facilities 24 hours, because after 4, nobody can come in this institution and demand to be treated or target our healthcare workers. Those areas that are high risk, they must operate 7 to 4. And they don't operate at night. They make sure that they are closed. And they must also make sure that the SAPS, they patrol the area. If there is a need, a demand, that these services need to be taken to the community must make sure that the healthcare workers and those with the infrastructure, they are safe. Because as we are talking, Cathy, you understand that these things happen in the community. And the community, they know who does these things, but they don't come forward to report these people. Then the healthcare facilities or the Department of Health need to work with the community. The same community is led by the same people who are politicians. And the same Department of Health is led by the politicians. As politicians, they need to come together and work together with the community. So make sure that we are practicing in a safe space.
Yeah, look, I think, one of the difficulties is that on the one hand, communities have been pushing for greater functionality, from the health department of these facilities, because people die on their way to hospitals because their local clinics are not open, which is why we started with the 24-hour operation in the first place. So the better solution is to say, how do we ensure that people are not being deprived of their basic right to be able to access healthcare, especially in cases of emergency, but at the same time also make sure that those officials that are providing these services then are kept safe. That seems to be where the gap is, that there isn't enough being done to actually ensure the safety of healthcare professionals. All right. Yeah, go ahead, Mbali.
Okay, so to provide the safe space, it needs SAPS, because remember, they are the ones who provide security. And this issue of outsourcing security is also a real big issue, the outsourcing of security. And you still have the savings. If you have money to outsource, why don't you outsource the VIP protection? Because you see that these security that you have outsourced, they are failing to protect your facilities and healthcare workers. Then why don't you advance the outsourcing if you are failing to insource?
Okay, all right. Let me go to Johannesburg. Pro, good morning.
How are you, Sis Cathy?
I'm all right, Pro. I understand you're a security guard.
Yes. Do you remember called you by that time, ne? I want to tell you something. She's right. It's not because of gender. All of us here we have been robbed and been pointed with a gun in our work. First case, I want to make it clear. That's why there's no protection in the health facilities or what. Security officers, they are not getting paid. I want to ask Ruzan in Tivenda straight. Maybe he will tell you what is happening. Ruzan, rename security are already. national minimum wage. We are not getting paid in time. How can you protect someone who is earning a lot of money and getting paid in time? Whereas when they say you will get paid on the 25th, you are going to get paid on the next month on the 17th. This thing is not good. That's why the security can take a bribe anytime, because they are hungry. No one who's looking after us, even the Department of Education, health, justice, everywhere. Whereas we are doing a proper job, how can you protect people whenever you are not getting paid? When our salary is too small. I want to know that's why there is a criminality inside the health facilities. Those guards, they are not getting paid. These people, Rudzani, because when we said security now, we are not getting paid in time. We are suffering. Our money is too small. I don't know who is bribing who in the Department of Health with those companies. No, says Cathy. Maybe Rudzani, she can answer. Thank you.
Just before you go, in terms of what you know and understand, is it the criminals that come and offer security guards bribes?
Yes, I exactly. But you know what? That is something like that can happen in that way. Maybe the guy, you don't know the guy who is entering the health fatality. You are maybe you can come and say, no, here's the 50 rand agent. You will buy a bread and a cold drink. You don't have a lunch. You are not getting paid. Obviously, hungry will take that 50 rand and go buy bread. But perhaps you don't know that he's a criminal. Others, they act like a patient when they enter the premises. But that thing is controversial. These people, they are treating security officers like a just being. Seriously, I'm telling you, that thing can happen anytime, Sister Cathy, because when someone is hungry, he can accept that 50 rand. Whereas that 50 rand you are going to look inside the facility, maybe someone is going to be killed there because of that 50 rand. What is the Rudzani doing? It's a long years and years working as a security officer. We are undermined. We are not getting paid. We fire the simple when they fire you. Nothing we can do. The lady was talking about outsource and insource. Man, why can't they insource the security officer in order to do their job properly? You are supposed to get paid on the 25th. You are not getting paid. You are going to get paid next month on the 19th. What is that?
All right.
Imenishuma kazituza nezo and then ngikoni kuza nezino ndishikuhamba ndimuvenda ndishuma umwe anepa kabundula Gauteng site ya ekuruleni ndikoni kuza ngena kuzita nefo boyo ka health you are kuri barekisa bosista barekisa bathu babereka ka Maria Special bathu bali private company libona baba muso wa African National Congress for kibona ba rana o government ya Gauteng kapa ke Limpopo kapa ke kai ma security ababa fisilo ba fana ditenda ba ja ditšhelete rena bana ba rona ba sokola le no aria gola rena ba bangwe a re tsibur bana ba rena ba yo jaeng. How can I protect someone who is getting a lot of money whereas I'm not getting nothing? Thank you very much, Sister Cathy. I will have to from over the radio.
Okay, all right. That's Proverbs' view. He's out in Johannesburg, and as you heard there, he's a security guard. I'm going to take a quick break, and then when I continue, I'm going to take some of the other callers that we have on the line. And the question really around what should happen at these facilities is what remains with us. And there's so many messages that our listeners are sending through, a lot of them saying, women have fought for so long just to be included in some of these structures, right? Just to be able to be security guards. And it seems that the idea of saying that they must not then do the night shift would be discriminatory and would in fact communicate a message of them being less capable than their male counterparts. But we'll continue the conversation in a moment.
Chelsea FC is not impressed with their current position. They want to ensure Sheffield United grabs nothing at Stamford Bridge.
Raheem Sterling, the big dipper, Chelsea 11.
Meanwhile, Sheffield United are also not comfortable in the danger zone.
Look, Birdie's header! And it drops into the far corner of the net.
Who will enjoy the festive season with victory? The Blues or the Blades? This is the Premier League. Catch the exhilarating clash between Chelsea FC and Sheffield United FC on Saturday, 16 December at 4 p.m. live on S3. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the game.
SAFM is sharing the festive spirit by giving away 5,000 Rand to 10 lucky winners. To enter, SMS SAFM Festive, followed by your name and what the festive season means to you to 41391. And you could win. Tune in to SAFM throughout December and we could be calling you. SMSs are charged at R1.50. Free SMSs, free minutes and SMS bundles do not apply. Terms and conditions apply. Visit safm.co.za for more information. The Portfolio Committee on Communications and Digital Technologies invites interested individuals and stakeholders to submit written comments on the SABC bill. The bill seeks to repeal the Broadcasting Act of 1999 to regulate the continued existence of the SABC, to provide its governance, to amend the ICASA Act of 2000 and the Electronic Communications Act of 2005. For more information, contact the Portfolio Committee of Communications and Digital Technologies by emailing sabcbill@parliament.gov.za, directed to Hanjiera Sali.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
We'll continue the conversation on the Talking Point. Colin, you're in Cape Town. Good morning.
Good morning to your guest. You know, Cathy, I disagree with ladies and women not working night shift, because I just heard you talk about discrimination. And the ladies, I know they want to go and work and do what the men do also, 100%. But I blame security companies. Security companies must also be aware where hotspots are and things like that. Their training, to me, might not be up to standard. Now, those 3 ladies and 3 guys, that means there were 6 at the warehouse. Were all 6 sitting somewhere, or were all 6 patrolling around the building and things like that? For somebody to enter undetected there, surely to goodness, one of them could have seen this somebody breaking in or coming in. Where's the panic buttons? Where's the little radios to communicate with each other? You see, the training is vitally important, because now poverty, they talk about poverty and unemployment contributes to crime. It does in a way, but if you see the crime and hear of the crime in this country, there are luxury cars, BMWs, and things like that. There are well-to-do criminals, rich criminals, doing hijacking, robberies, and things like that, in transit hikes and things like that. We've got to start respecting our women, no matter what type of job they do. Right. They rob them going into the squatter camps. The ambulance people get robbed and mugged and assaulted and things like that. There's no respect for a woman. I remember the old days. District 6 in Cape Town was a gang-infested area, and I heard people talk on the radio. All gangsters, they respected nurses. When they saw a nurse walk down the road in the evening, a gangster could send somebody, walk Mercy home, walk her home, make sure she's safe at home. But today, I'm sorry to say, we've got no respect in this country anymore. It's lawlessness will never, ever, ever come right, Cathy.
All right.
Thanks.
All right, Colin, we're going to have to leave it there. Let me get back to my guests. Unfortunately, we're running out of time for this conversation. Rudzani, you've got more to respond to. Let me give you the opportunity to go first.
Thank you, Cathy. I think the concern raised by the security officer in Johannesburg is to a large extent to the outcome, rather, in that when you're not paid, you may be easily corruptible. That one is a fact. There is scientific evidence that support that view. However, what we've done as a department is that when we hire these service providers, even at the time of evaluation, we normally evaluate them on financial capability, that if they're given a project, will they be able to deliver, meaning buying equipment and also paying salaries before they are paid. Secondly, in government, we've got a policy that suggests that sales providers must be paid within 30 days of rendering of a service. So the reason why we want companies to display their financial capabilities for that reason, that they should be able to pay while waiting for the payment. Should we not pay them immediately, because sometimes it takes a bit longer to process the payment. To be specific, I had a meeting with all provinces last week when we were looking at the festive plan. One of the issues that I was interested in was to check if security officers are paid and also bonuses are paid to those that are deserving it, just to make sure that is raised by my colleague, it does not happen. So we are working very hard with our security service providers to ensure that they pay security officers in time. The part of employment and labor to be part of the task team and SIRA's role is to ensure compliance with security companies. We conduct inspections from time to time jointly with SAPS, Department of Labor, SIRA. We take on security companies that are not paying their gas in time and that are also underpaying security officers. Perhaps I need to conclude with this very one case, that you see, deployment of both males and females is regulated in our sector. Our constitution on the Bill of Rights suggests that we need to respect dignity and privacy. Security female can only fetch female healthcare users. Male, the same. Even the Criminal Procedure Act supports that view, that a decent and orderly searching, man to man, female to female. So should we only have male deployed at night, we may not comply to this very requirement, Kate.
All right.
I think I should end here. Thank you.
All right, Rudzani, thanks for that response. Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. We're completely out of time for this conversation. It's 11 o'clock.
Independent and impartial. This is SAFM News.
Thank you very much, Cathy. The top stories are Sawa positive CPI numbers for November and Zahara's memorial service to be held tomorrow. Very good morning. We start with positive news. The Consumer Price Index CPI for November declined to 5.5% year-on-year, compared with 5.9% in October. That is according to the newly released Stats SA figures. On a month-on-month basis, CPI declined to minus 0.1% in November from 0.9% in October. This keeps the CPI within the Reserve Bank's inflation target range of 3 to 6%. The CPI measures inflation that consumers experience in their day-to-day living expenses. Lawyers for Human Rights say officials abuse their power when detaining undocumented migrants. The organization launched a report on the status of immigration detention in South Africa. It focused on recent trends in immigration detentions in the country, with a particular look at the impact on migrants and their interactions with government officials. The organization's Nabila Mia says officials do not follow the 48 hours time frame rule when detaining persons without documentation.
There is often an abuse of that time period of 48 hours because during that 48 hours, they're not allowed to just keep you there for the 48 hours and do nothing. They actually have to actively take steps to verify your ID. If you say my ID or my documentation or my refugee passport is at home, they are supposed to take you home to go and verify it, but they don't do that. They take people, the police take people, they drive around in the vans and wait for you to cave and bribe and solicit bribes before releasing you. And we found that to happen so often.
The Council for Medical Schemes has warned that the medical aid industry will collapse if the relevant authorities do not handle the National Health Insurance Bill cautiously. The National Council of Provinces has passed the bill, which many in the sector are resisting, saying the government is ignoring their concerns. The concerns of professional organizations and medical insurance companies include a lack of clarity on the future of medical schemes, funding models, potential corruption, and allegations of insufficient public participation. The Council's Dr. Sipho Kabane.
So it's understandable that anxiety, that if vested and you're used to significant profits to yourselves and to your shareholders, anything which threatens that will become a concern. So we're not surprised that some of those are already saying that indeed they are going to challenge this particular legislation because it threatens their livelihoods. So that's the nature of life. We do understand that.
The Gauteng Human Settlements Department has demolished over 200 shacks that were built illegally on its land in Palm Ridge, east of Joburg. The department says the illegal occupants arrived in December last year. They then took over the department's serviced stands meant for the Ikacheleng Rapid Land Release Program. They also illegally connected services, including electricity and water. Here's the department spokesperson, Tahir Sima.
We are working with the courts, developers, and police to execute eviction orders against these illegal acts of land and house invasions. We are appealing to the community to report land invasion, illegal sale of land, or suspicious housing forms and posters, and or corruption to 0800 701 701.
The multi-award winning musician Bulelwa Mkutukana's memorial service will be held tomorrow at the Rhema Bible Church in Randburg, north of Joburg. Mkutukana, whose stage name was Zahara, died in a Joburg hospital on Monday at the age of 36. She released 5 studio albums, with the 2011 debut album Loliwe reaching double platinum. And the war between Israeli soldiers and Hamas militants has continued in Gaza. There are reports of intense Israeli bombardment of the area. The main focus again is in Khan Yunis in the south of the territory. The BBC's Yolanda Nell.
Amid brutal street battles and intense Israeli bombardment, the number of dead is continuing to mount in Gaza. Palestinian health officials say that at least another 50 people were killed in the latest wave of airstrikes. More than 18,400 Gazans are said to have been killed since the war began. This morning, Israel's military said that 8 more of its soldiers were killed in the latest fighting. Israel and the US argue that stopping the war now will only benefit Hamas.
The top story at 11 o'clock, the Consumer Price Index CPI for November declined to 5.5% year-on-year, compared with 5.9% in October. Headlines at 5:30 for SAFM News.
It's in those minds young and aflame, in the reach of those dare to reach, in the possibilities dancing just for you, in the eye and ear of a dream in fever. Yes, it's in hope. Hope and light pulled near and sent afar. Yes, it's in hope. From us to you. SABC Education. Enriching minds. Enriching lives. Botswana qualified for the BNP Group Africa Cup Finals 2023 with an unbeaten record in the qualifiers and became winners of the Southern African Cup in May, while Malawi finished runners-up by winning 2 of their 4 games, whereas Mozambique also qualified for the BNP Group Africa Cup Finals in a spectacular manner, pipping Eswatini and Mauritius on net run rate in the Southern African Cup. Witness the thrilling action from 11 to 19 December, live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Don't miss out on the SAFM Playwriting Competition. To enter, visit safm.co.za. From the menu icon, select Competitions. Click on the SAFM Drama Playwriting Competition. Read the T's and C's of the competition. Check out the competition's Q&A. Fill in the entry form by clicking the link provided. Email your script to drama@safm.co.za. For further information, email drama@safm.co.za. Entries close on the 22nd of January 2024. SAFM, leading the conversation.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
It's 8 after 11 o'clock. Welcome to the third and final hour of The Talking Point. Coming up in this hour, we turn the focus or the attention on ourselves as citizens and specifically look at a civic duty, civic responsibility. What role do we need to be playing as members of society in safeguarding and protecting our democracy and making sure that, we are holding not only our leaders accountable, but that we are holding ourselves accountable too. That's the conversation that we'll have in this hour. Interesting views coming through from you in terms of the conversation we had in the 10 o'clock hour, focusing on female security guards in particular and the concern raised by the Association of Private Security Owners around the vulnerability, in particular of female security guards. They have been calling for them to be excluded from working night shift. I think after that conversation that we've had, it's clear that removing female officers from the night shift will not answer the question of improving security for healthcare practitioners and patients who all become victims of crime when, criminals take advantage of the situation and target certain facilities. So it looks like the answer to the question is really going to be conducting risk assessments of specific areas and deploying enough resources, whether male or female, as a response to the threat and the risk that is being encountered. At least that's the sense that I get from the conversation we face, because we've got female nurses as well. We've got female doctors. It doesn't mean that they're any less vulnerable than female security guards. Yes, we know violence in this country is gendered, but is the answer to say that you then deprive women of the opportunity to be able to work just so that you can keep them safe, whereas, we can be creating a better environment and maybe an ecosystem that's safer for everybody, including and especially women, is perhaps how we need to be looking at it. So let's get then into our final conversation of the morning. We're joined by human rights activist Mark Hayward. Mark, good morning. Always a pleasure being in conversation with you. Great to have you on the show.
Hi, Cathy. It's wonderful to be back with you as well, especially the last chance of the year to talk. So thanks for having me.
Sure. There's so many different things we can talk about, Mark, but, we end off this year with many South Africans mindful of the weight of 2024, the burden that is going to rest on our shoulders, which is really trying to elect a government for yet another term of office. And there'll be so much said between now and then. And I just wanted to bring the conversation back, Mark, to our civic duty, our civic responsibility. We have so many political parties that have been registered, so many individuals raising their hands to say, look, you know what, I think I can do the better job. Pick me, give me your vote. And yet, on the show, I still take so many callers on a day-to-day basis who say, I am not going to vote because I don't see any option that speaks to me. So I'm going to sit it out. You can have 1,200 more political parties, and I'm not convinced that they will be speaking to my issues. And, and it's fair comment if somebody feels that they're not represented. But at the same time, of course, there's also the conversation around our own responsibility in safeguarding, in protecting this democracy. And I know that you're a great person who can talk us through that importance.
Thanks, Cathy. Well, let me start by saying that democracy puts a heavy responsibility on us all, as you've said, and 2024 is a critical year to exercise that responsibility and power, because on the citizens, and the citizens at the end of the day is you and me, is this responsibility and duty to try to make sure that the people who we elect to every level of government are people who have our best interests at heart, and people that we can trust with the huge resources and the huge power to build a country that meets all of our needs and is good for all of us. So if you boil that down to you and me, Cathy, I think one of the first responsibilities is to make sure that we are informed enough, you and I, to make those decisions, particularly when we're going to go into a year where, as you said, potentially hundreds of political parties are going to be making promises. So how do people sift? How do people judge? How do people make real commitments? How do people start educating and empowering ourselves immediately for this critical year? That, I think, is one of the first steps that we have to take. I'm not sure if it's sounding too abstract, but it does come back to questioning my own role and responsibility.
How to judge is, we all have our own criteria of what we think a good leader might look like. And in South Africa, especially today, we're very focused on what we believe to be our key issues. And I think that's why you also see a fragmentation of our politics, because everybody is championing a cause that they believe has been neglected by the other parties. Is that a good place to be moving from, Mark? That we just, if let's say I believe in healthcare, the NHI, then I'm going to go for a party that emphasizes the NHI and almost disregard any other aspect of our social life.
No, I don't think it is, because one of the things I think we all have to do as people is to get out of silos and get out of only looking at what we think are our own immediate interests or our own immediate issue. It may be that in particular areas, for example, I know a lot about health, so I'm in a much better position to judge. But I can't just focus myself on health. I think we need to sift out, what are the critical questions that face our country? What are the critical questions that affect people's dignity in this country? What are the critical questions that affect my ability to feel that I'm treated equally, that I'm respected? What are the critical threats to this country? We've all been caught by surprise almost by ESCOM. I mean, although it's been around for a long time, but it's impacted so severely on the country. But are there looming challenges to the country? I mean, we're starting to talk more and more about water. Should we be looking at water as a critical threat and judging politicians by the solutions and the ideas that they have to ensure that 60 million people are able to access clean, safe, a reliable supply of water? What are we doing? What should we be thinking about our children? I've spent time recently with the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund, and they issued a report a few weeks ago on the state of the nation's children. Now, children can't vote, which means that in some ways they are voiceless, but they will become the future generations and leaders and voters of our country. And yet we're we're allowing terrible things to happen to our children. So I think we have to all of us learn to look across single issues and to judge the best interest on a gamut of issues for the country.
On the question of how do we judge, Mark, is there a standard to try and determine what South Africa needs in leadership today? Because the reality is, we know what we don't want, right? We know we don't want corrupt leaders. We know we don't want people that are going to regurgitate the same old thinking to really what is new problems that are facing modern societies the world over. And we're looking for that ingenuity. We're looking for that innovation in the problem solving that we need in order to put us in a better position, right, to face the future that we're yet to encounter. But do you think we have a clear idea as a society of what should leaders in this country look like? And in terms of issues, this idea of a national question, is there one national question that we can say we're grappling with as a society that, again, may be easier to build consensus around?
Well, you pose two sets of questions, and I'll try to respond on the first question. How do we judge the people put forward that put themselves forward? And I would almost say that's a good conversation for you to have, Cathy. What do we look for in leadership? And to ask people what we think we should be looking for in leadership. So to help people draw up a checklist that allows you to assess whether this person is a good and capable person or not. I think in leadership we are looking for people who have values of honesty, openness, transparency. I think we're looking for people who have track records of service to the community, of real service to the community. I think we're looking for people who have some very big ideas and big ideas that come from experience and education and expertise in a particular area. I think we're looking for people who genuinely live lives that reflect a concern for other people and the community. Those are some of the things that I would suggest as a starting point.
Mark,
but I
are you still talking about politicians here?
Well, there you go. But Cathy, people are fed up of politicians. I mean, there was research a few days ago that showed that young people are alienated from democracy. They don't want to vote because they're alienated from politicians, and they're alienated from politicians because politicians have a track record of lying, and politicians have a track record of self-service and positioning themselves and their family, and that's not what politicians are meant to be. So that's why you're raising a critical conversation that Mark Hayward shouldn't answer, that in a sense your listeners should answer, and then we should build consensus on that very question.
and for the second part, Mark, on the question of the national question.
Again, I think it's a useful question to throw out. I'll tell you a couple of ideas that I have. One is that I think that we have to fix our education system. We have to fix it from early childhood development, meaning, the youngest age of a child, and meaning early childhood development understood broadly in ensuring that a child has access to education, to nutrition, to healthcare services, right through basic education and into tertiary education, because the education system is failing. Surely we can get consensus on the need to improve the quality of teaching. That is, I think, a critical question. The other thing that I would say perhaps is, how do we rebuild our public service? Because we all depend on public servants to deliver health, to deliver education, to deliver policing, to deliver infrastructure, to deliver water. But our state capacity is crumbling. So what do you, Cathy, want from a public servant? What do we want from the state? I do think that we as a country, one of our problems and why we're in a mess is we draw up very, very long lists of hundreds of things, and we don't know where to start because there's too many things. What are 5 key issues that the country has the capability to focus on and solve? And we solve those things, and it then has a ripple effect. It restores hope. It restores our sense of our own power. It restores our dignity as people and as a country to deal with very, very large challenges.
Mark, it's always easy to say to people, get involved, right? Do something. You have agency. You don't have to just sit down. This is the IEC is going with the slogan of "Your democracy, own it." But how do we own our democracy? What is expected of us in this instance?
Well, we get in. Personally, my personal view is that we get involved first and foremost at our local level in trying to make our immediate communities places that are safe, that nobody is hungry in, that children are protected in, that, the schools are functional in. There's always things to do at a local level. And then from the local level, we build and reflect our power up to the national level. It's the local level where we start by holding politicians accountable, for example. I mean, in some ways, Cathy, we're not having a local government election next year, but in some ways, local government has a profound effect on what we experience on a day-to-day basis, and it has huge resources. So what are we doing in relation to our ward councillors, to the people that we elect? Do you and I know our own powers at local government level? I'm part of campaigns to try and fix Johannesburg at the moment because Johannesburg is falling apart. So I have to learn about how the city of Johannesburg is meant to work.
And I wonder, Mark, again, because of the work that you have done as an activist over the years, is there a way of getting involved, right, at a community level in all of these things where we perhaps see problems, we see dysfunction, and we believe we can bring solutions? Can you get involved without being seen as being political? Because that, of course, I believe is another issue that people often want to stay away from. They want to help, but they don't want to be seen as that very step they're taking, being seen as it being political, and then forcing them to align themselves with a particular political party.
Yes, you can, because community organizations, at least many of the ones that I work with, are not party political. They are about trying to fix the community or trying to support particular people in a community. Of course, all of these issues are political in some ways, but they don't need to be party political. And Cathy, our constitution bases itself on the idea of people's participation. It encourages people to participate at the local level and at every level. And our country can really only work with local participation because there's only so much that a government can do. People at a community level have to work in synergy with government. So I would say to people, local activism is not party political. Local activism is about rights, is about dignity, is about trying to better your own life and better the lives of people around you.
But to the extent that it is often interpreted as being political by political players?
Well, I don't have an easy answer for that, except that I don't think it should deter people. Political parties are in a fierce contest. We know that there's a lot of corruption in government amongst political parties. Political parties sometimes want to control community organization. But I also know many, many great activists in many, many communities who are able to organize free of party political influence. And it's your right to be able to do that. So I don't think that you should not do it because you are afraid. You need to take the first step, and you need to find other people to work with. And I've always, in my activism, I've always been amazed at how much power we actually have when we start talking to somebody else and addressing the issues that are around us.
As you're speaking, Mark, I'm thinking of a conversation that we had with some leaders of NGOs and some of them, and that are also community activists on different issues, and some of them were saying how they're often accused of being drivers of regime change because of the work they're doing. So you spoke about the issue of education. You were previously involved with Section 27 and some of the work that it did at the time when it comes to the eradication of pit latrines and the norms and standards in schools. When you are doing such critical work and it is being interpreted as being for regime change, how do you continue to do that without being swallowed by the politics of it all?
Gosh, you're asking big questions. Look, we joked a few minutes ago about politicians and how so many politicians have become corrupted. And politicians, unfortunately, don't want people to be active in communities, because when people start getting active, they start learning, they start discovering their own powers, they start questioning decisions that politicians make, they start holding politicians accountable. And all of that can be done as a citizen, not as a member of a political party. So what you are presenting to me is a reflection of something that's happening in many communities, but it's happening for wrong reasons. In my experience, Cathy, I'll give you a direct experience. When we started the treatment action campaign in the late 1990s to try to get access to antiretroviral medicines for people living with HIV at a time when the government didn't want to provide those medicines, we were called all sorts of names by politicians, by President Thabo Mbeki, by the ANC. We were called, traitors. We were called pharmaceutical company agents. We were, as you said, accused of regime change. We just kept on going. We just made sure that we worked with, educated ourselves, built local power in communities. And because we kept on building, we were able to build a civic movement that, as you know, has now saved 5 million lives, because that's the number of people who receive antiretroviral treatment. And I think that power to change and better lives exists in every sphere. It exists on food insecurity. It exists on education. It exists on gender-based violence. We have to encourage each other to take these steps, because if we don't become active citizens, then we end up just sitting in our homes, watching our society degenerate around us, watching our own lives degenerate around us, and we become powerless.
We're going to continue with this conversation in a moment with Mark Hayward. It's time for your latest news headlines.
Thanks, Cathy. With the news headlines, good morning. There's good news for consumers after a decrease in the fuel price led to the latest inflation print, which shows an easing of the prices of goods in November. The Hawks have arrested 4 more suspects at the South African State Theatre, the SAST in Pretoria, and lawyers for human rights say officials abuse their power when detaining undocumented migrants. A full news update coming up at midday.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
All right, we continue the conversation on the Talking Point. We're talking about civic duty, civic responsibility. How do we begin to rise up to that responsibility that each of us carries, being part of a democratic society. Mark Hayward is a human rights activist, has been part of our landscape in this country for a very, very long time, and I think has served the South African communities in various ways, and his work and some of the results he's been able to achieve from his work as an activist speak for itself. Mark, you know, what you're saying just before we went to news is really emphasizing the opportunity cost, that when we are sitting down and doing nothing as South Africans, there is a cost associated with that.
Yes, there is. I mean, and there's a cost to each of us, and there's a cost to our community, Cathy. I mean, all of us feel very unhappy in our country at the moment because we've seen the way our communities have deteriorated. We've seen the way nyope and drugs have consumed young people. We've seen the levels of crime and violence. I mean, 25,000 people die of murder every year. And I think part of that responsibility lies with us because we've sat as if we are powerless to shape our politics and to shape our society. So, you know, fixing these things may start with discussions like you and I are having. It may start with just discussions within a family around the dinner table. It may start with discussions within a sports club. But we can always find things to do. You know, for me, one of my starting points, Cathy, was just understanding the constitution of our country, because the constitution of our country is the supreme law of this country. No politician, no political party is higher than it. The constitution sets out the vision for South Africa, but it also sets out Cathy Mohlahlana's rights, Mark Hayward's rights, every person's rights. The constitution says every person in our country has a right to sufficient food. It says that every child has a right to basic healthcare services. You know, it takes us back to where we started talking this morning, which is, what is the change I have to make in myself to begin with, to find the power, to be an active citizen, to work in a way that can improve our communities and our countries. But how does it start with me?
Oh, what an important question. And I love how you phrased it there, Mark. Let me go to the phone lines. Tammy, you're on the line. I understand you're from Salga. Good morning, Tammy.
Good morning, Sis Cathy.
Hi.
Good morning.
Yes.
Yes, this is Mr. Tammy Ngubane. I'm very much interested in your conversation. And I would like to make an input. You say it's important that we make a correct diagnosis. This is my understanding of the problem. As South Africans, we do talk about where we should go. So we answer the question, what must happen? As you are saying, as the conversation is unfolding again here, that we must use our right, democratic right, to participate, hold people accountable. But that is the vision, that is the destination. But we are not saying anything on the two questions, on how and why. So it's more like we want to reap without sowing. Up until such time, we identify the forces that we must master up until such time. Because if you are taking a journey, it's not about knowing where you are going, but you also need the direction and the road and the tools that are going to use, that are going to get there, to close that particular gap. So those are the things that are not there. No matter how hard we call for the action, it will never materialize up until we do what needs to be done. For instance, if you are talking about the state, in terms of the state, it should be a three-legged pot. You need the community, you need the elected representative, you need the administrators. Those are the three-legged pot. If you remove one, obviously the problem is guaranteed that will still arise. And in this three-legged pot, what is also not there is the type of the relationship, because the community are the owners of the system. They create government through elections. They also finance. They give you the mandate. They give you the money. But as things stand, are they playing their role? Because they've got that relationship. There's a relationship between the elected representative and the community. They bear a relationship of a principal and agent. The agent can't do things that are not in the interest. They take mandate directly and implement what is said by the principal. But if the principal doesn't play its role, because things are interconnected, as you know, if the liver can't play its part in the body, even other parts that are operating fine, they're going to be affected and the whole system is going to collapse. Now, as things stand, the owners of the system, the principals, are not playing their role. But we need to then go to the detail and then say, what is it that needs to be done than calling for a change? For instance, people are not organized. You can't say individuals must hold the state accountable. The state is an institution. You can't say individuals must hold an institution accountable. But the people must come together. They must be organized. It's the first step that they must structure themselves into interest groups. They become institutions. They coordinate their views, integrate them into structured, well-canvassed views, and then enter into negotiations with the state and bargain, and have a mandate taking in the report back as an institution. Now, the people are disorganized. You go to the community, you are meeting these people, they are saying this, you go back the following day to give a report back, you meet new people with new... So there's that chaos up until we need to identify the building blocks that are going to take us there.
Sure. Mr. Ngubane, your input has been so insightful, and I really appreciate the fact that you took the time to call in. You've given me a lot to think about, and I think when we have this conversation again, which we will do in 2024, we might reach out to you to come back and share some of your thoughts, because from your experience, you might also have an idea as to, why the how and why the why that you've asked about is not resonating with people. And when I talk about change, it mustn't be seen necessarily in the lens of, we need to change political parties. I'm not solely in the political aspect of things. I'm saying that we need to get involved, because part of that involvement will also result in more people voting, because we need to care enough to actually see it to that conclusion too.
Yes, I fully understand where you are coming from, Sis Cathy. You are saying, in terms of the status quo, not all is well. So it means whatever that we are doing is creating an ideal situation. Yeah. So we can't do things in the same way and expect to achieve different results. So we need to change how we do things.
Absolutely.
But changing actions is linked into changing the thinking. So we need a shift in the mindset of all the role players that are in the ecosystem. For instance, just to make an example, I understand that you are saying next day we'll having this conversation. We need a paradigm shift from the thinking. For instance, you can support a political party, which is fine, but people, the society, for them to benefit, they need to employ a sailor's thinking. A sailor can take a decision based on what is the conditions right now. 10 minutes later, the circumstances changes. And you can't say you've got a decision, you need to change it. So I'm saying, vote for the political party, be partisan when you go to elections, support whoever that you want to support for your own reason. But beyond that, the people must unite and talk with one voice to to then hold the political party that is in the government to then they deliver on your promises in the manifesto.
All right, Mr. Ngubane, I'm going to have to pause it there from you for today, but absolutely to be continued. I want to quickly go to Rueduport. Mufebiadi, good morning.
Good morning, Osketi. Okay?
Yes, Rogona le kae?
Oh, this topic is touch, and I was about to phone you about it. I love Gamrat and Tate Mark Haywood, you know. The Ubwa, poor Eklaki, Buake, profit. Kiri, as long as we don't all stand together, the politicians decide, I think somehow Lorona, we must take part in the community. Like, for instance, okay, I've Karomela reading WhatsApp ko 702 ka kopa gore o ka all the stations ka o fela ga ronda go be le program e introducing local heroes, whereby if a perfect platform to everyone who want to make change in a community to freely come and talk about it, so that I can support it from us as a South Africans. You know why I'm saying that? Because of if you've got those, if only those ideas that you can implement, somehow sabotage. Sometimes those petty things, those things they block they hinder a person to pursue what is going to help the community. They're somehow killing because of our community is dying under our nose, that there's ideas which they can be implemented from the people from the ground, which they can make a huge change.
All right.
So my proposal is, I'm sincerely asking if those kind of platform go on the radio stations to allow everyone to go through freely and agree support to bring change in our location. All I'm asking is, let us all pull together to bring change in our location. That's all I want to.
Unfortunately, I'm going to have to leave it there with you for this morning. Thank you for calling in, and an important point that you're making. Mark, we're completely out of time for this conversation. 20 seconds.
No, an important conversation. I just agree with the two callers. The last caller, she said a very important thing, which is people in communities know what the problems are. They don't only know what the problems, very often they know what the solutions are. And by organizing together, they build power to get those solutions implemented. The problem they experience, which relates to what Tami said, though, is that very often they find the government, the local government, unresponsive and sometimes even hostile to those solutions. And how you overcome that problem is perhaps the subject for another discussion, because maybe one day we could talk about actual community struggles that have taken place, and particularly instances where people have managed to make progress and solve problems and unite a community. Thanks, Cathy.
Mark, thank you so much for being part of this conversation. Thank you all for your contributions. Like I said, to be continued, ... That's where we leave it on the talking point for today. I'm back with you tomorrow.
Join us on Afternoon Express Tuesdays at 6 p.m. on S3. As being alone this festive season is what clinical psychologist Slee Mbata is here to help us with. Gynecologist Sherry Lee Franks has tips to keep your digestive and urinary tract healthy. Plus, get genius gifting and fashion ideas on Afternoon Express Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Repeat Sundays at 8:30 a.m. only on S3.
The argument of who will lift the Carling Knockout Cup will be concluded by the referee's final whistle. Stellenbosch FC and TS Galaxy FC tackles each other for the big prize at the Moses Mabhida Stadium. Who will prevail, eThekwini, Stellies or the Rockets? Catch the Carling Knockout Cup final between Stellenbosch FC and TS Galaxy FC on Saturday, 16th December at 2:30 p.m. Live on SABC1 and SABC radio stations. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. #We love it here. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
The book reading. Please note the views expressed in this book are not that of the station. Listeners' discretion is advised. SFM presents another episode of Simply Larry, read by Simpiwe Nkosi, written by Elias Masilela.
Chapter 19. Chewing Gum, Bell-Bottoms and Jeans. This period we are looking at covers the era of Levi's, Wrangler Lee and Bang Bang jeans, when jeans were known as Bogarts. Wearing a Bogart was in vogue and defined many a young person. It was a fashion statement, but not on school grounds. It was the era of the bell-bottom. It was the era of the Onitsuka Tiger, Moccasin, Bostonian, Barker, Barter Toughies, Hush Puppy and Grasshopper shoes. It was the time of the Hunter boot. It was the fond time of the London and Scotland fog jackets. It therefore follows that Salesian was a mirror of the societal values and tastes that defined the people who associated with the school. But it was also a time in which the country was characterized by deep poverty. So, you found a kaleidoscope of these extremes and multitudes of permutations that fell in between. The one extreme, namely of high fashion and glamour, was populated predominantly by students of South African origin. At the other extreme were poor Swazi boys from the areas neighboring Manzini. While this may seem like a contradiction of the life of the average black South African of the time, defined by race and economic segregation, the majority of South African students who came to Swaziland were from well-to-do South African families and largely of urban origin. By contrast, the majority of the Swazi boys were entirely of rural origin. In trying to deal with these disparities, the school insisted on, as uniform as possible, a school dress code. It was a rule that the uniform would be supplied by the school to avoid any quality differences. It originally insisted on affordable clothing. Thus, the early uniform design consisted primarily of short grey trousers, sky blue short-sleeved shirts and jerseys or pullovers, as well as black school shoes, with no school blazer and no tie. Long trousers and shirts, ties and blazers were considered either unaffordable for the majority of the students or purely a luxury. But in subsequent years, long trousers were introduced, followed by a tie. I was pleasantly surprised to notice that, even in the primary school, long trousers